Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Live It Up. This is the show where we explore and discuss how to take your life to that next level and beyond. We cover health, wealth, relationships, and how to create a life you absolutely love. I'm your host and coach, Fletcher Ellingson. Amy will be joining us in just a few minutes as we discuss a topic that affects millions of Americans, myself included, so stick around as Amy educates us on acid reflux. What are the symptoms? What's the cause? And what can you do about it? Many people live with it and they don't even realize they have it. But the good news is there are things you can do to address the issue, so stick around because health is the first wealth. All right, before we get to that, I want to remind you that if you have questions that you would like us to answer on or off the air, you can email them directly to me at fletcher@fletcherellingson.com. Now, let's get to today's email. It says, Fletcher, I've been listening to what you have been saying for a while about how to improve my life. I've got to tell you though, it sounds like a lot of work. And most of the time, I just don't feel like doing it. If it's such a great way to live, then why does it take so much work and why don't I feel like doing it? Seems like it should be much easier. That's all I have to say on that. Ben. Cool. Ben, thanks for reaching out. Strong people reach out, and I believe that this is actually an important topic to you, otherwise you wouldn't have taken the time to express yourself. I hear that you don't feel like putting in the effort to create a better life for yourself, and you're of the opinion that it should be easier to create a life you love. Again, thanks for reaching out and expressing that. And I've got a question for you. Ben, do you feel like getting up when your alarm goes off in the morning? Do you always feel like going to work? Do you feel like paying your rent or mortgage or paying your car payment? Do you feel like cleaning your house or making dinner? I assume the answer to those questions is no, at least some of the time. Yet, you still do it. You likely get up in the morning instead of laying in bed all day. You likely go to work and you likely pay your bills even though you don't feel like it. Why do we do things if we don't feel like it? Well, it's because we've made commitments and we live from a place of those commitments. You see, when you live from your commitments, you frequently get results that serve your life. You pay your rent or mortgage because you made a commitment to do so. And as a result, you have a place to live and thrive. You see, acting from your commitments allows you to experience your personal power. See, what happens when we make a commitment is that we agree to be responsible for something. We agree to be responsible for paying a bill, caring for a partner, or we agree to be responsible for caring for our children. You can break it down like this. Commitment and responsibility allow you to experience power in life. There really isn't another way that allows you to experience your power. That is the recipe for experiencing power in your life. Power is the result of taking responsibility for the commitments you make. I'll say that again. I think it's worth saying again. Power is the result of taking responsibility for the commitments you make. You see, the more we become practiced at living from our commitments, the more power we experience and the more we can create a life that serves us. If we only live from our feelings, then we're going to be building a life that doesn't work very well. Think about it. One day you feel like being married, but the next day when things are rocky, you don't feel like being married. If you acted just based on your feelings, you might decide to get divorced. If you're waiting until you feel like going to marriage counseling, that day likely won't come. If you don't feel like going to work, you may quit your job then. Or if you don't feel like saving, you may spend more than you should. You see, if you wait to feel like getting in shape or getting healthy, that day probably won't come. Here's the deal. Most of us are extremely practiced at living from our feelings. Most of us are extremely practiced at living from our feelings. It doesn't mean we are homeless or have given up on life. It just means we've decided to take responsibility for a few of our commitments that we have made a must. Like, I must pay the rent or mortgage because if I don't, I will be homeless. Or I must go to work because if I don't, we won't be able to feed our family or have a car, etc., or a home. See, you have made some things in your life a must. You still may not like them, but the consequences of not fulfilling on your commitments would be disastrous. And that's part of the secret. You have to make other things in your life a must too. Commit to getting in shape and creating health. Make it a must. How do you do that? Well, first you say it out loud. You share it with your friends or your family or your coworkers. You get accountability. You see, no one wants to declare those types of things and then not do it. We want to make good on those public declarations because it feels good, right? It feels good when we keep our word. The second thing to do is what you already do when you don't want to go to work. You think to yourself, shoot, if I don't go to work, we won't be able to pay rent, and then we'll get kicked out. Then we'll have to move in with my parents until they kick us out, and then we're really going to be up a creek. Plus, my wife would probably leave me if that happened. You can see, if you focus on how painful it will be, and if you don't make good on your commitment, then you're going to get a different result. You're going to get into action. And then you also focus on how good it will feel if you make good on your commitment. For instance, how good would it feel to make good on your declaration that you're going to get into shape, to lose weight and create health in your life? How would you look in the mirror, right? If you'd been doing that for several months. If you lost some fat and gained some muscle or got toned, what would you be able to do that you couldn't do now? Think about it. How would it affect what you wear? How would it affect your sex life? How would you feel in general about yourself? You see, you focus on how painful it would be if you don't take responsibility for your commitments, and then you focus on how great you're going to feel if you do make good on them. And that is how you influence your actions and the results in your life. You've probably heard me say it before, repetition is the mother of skill. Now, the more you practice this, the easier it becomes. It's like working out. The more you work out, the stronger your muscles become, right? So let's look at it in reverse. The less commitments you make, the less responsibility you take for your life. You become weaker in your mind and your ability to live powerfully and freely. In fact, you become very weak. But if you start listening to someone like me, or it sounds like a lot of work, you got to do what we just talked above, right? Does it take effort? Sure it does. But it becomes easier and easier, and what becomes possible is incredible, as opposed to living a small game of life because you're not practiced at making commitments and not practiced at taking responsibility. Ben, I urge you to stay in this conversation. Start building the muscles of personal development. Your life will be much, much richer as a result. I've seen it in my clients, I've seen it in me, and I know you can do this, and I believe in you. All right, we're going to go to a commercial break, then we'll be back to talk with one of my favorite people in the world, Amy, so stay with us. Hey everybody, welcome back to Live It Up. We are here with Amy. Hello, Amy.
Hello, Fletcher.
All right, give us a topic. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about gastroesophageal reflux disease.
Interesting. Can't even say it. Tell us what that is in layperson's terms.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about two types. So the one main one is gastroesophageal reflux disease, which is also called GERD. You may have seen it abbreviated like that, and that's when the acid from the stomach comes up to the esophagus. So you know, the esophagus is what connects your mouth to your stomach, and that's when stomach acid goes up there. And the acid can it does irritate the lining of esophagus and then cause the symptom of heartburn.
So we're talking about heartburn, acid reflux.
Kind of thing, yes.
Okay.
And just to say, like, so you would say reflux is considered moderate to severe if people are having it a couple times a week even.
Oh, really?
Yes. And there's another kind of reflux, this one you really won't be able to say, called laryngopharyngeal reflux, or called LPR. And that's where the acid goes up and actually goes into the pharynx, which is like in the windpipe area, and causes some different symptoms like hoarseness and cough.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the next question is obvious. How do people know that they've got it?
Right. So as far as the esophageal reflux goes, people could have heartburn, and a lot of times it happens after you eat, or people will frequently have it as well at night is a common time to have it because you're laying down and the acid is more likely to come up. chest pain, that happens more when people have esophageal spasm, which is spasm of the esophagus. That can be really painful and actually even feel like heart pain. You can have difficulty swallowing, where the bottom of the esophagus gets kind of swollen or tight and have a hard time swallowing. People may feel or may taste like a bitter or sour taste in the back of their mouth. Or other times there's this thing called the globus sensation.
The globus
sensation. That's where people feel like they have something stuck in their throat all the time. And that is also from reflux.
Interesting.
I have more to say, though. So
please continue.
The nighttime acid reflux is really common, and people will have a chronic cough. Like, it's one of the main causes of chronic cough. And then people can have laryngitis or feeling of hoarseness. Like, I'll frequently send someone to the ear, nose, and throat doctor. They'll take a look down in their throat and look at their vocal cords, and they can tell there's damage from reflux, and that's a really common cause. Sometimes even people will be diagnosed with asthma, and it can be from this acid reflux, and then also disrupted sleep. People don't know why they're waking up, and at times it can be related to reflux.
How common is this?
You know, I don't know that I know the stats. I didn't look those up before our talk.
As far as your
in my practice, it's very common. Like, I would say, maybe almost half of my patients, adult patients, over age 50, have an issue with it or have had at least.
Is this something kids get?
You could. It's unusual, but you can. The one thing I was going to say about the LPR, the windpipe stuff, is that frequently is silent. People don't even know they have it. So maybe only a third of people ever actually have heartburn. So 2/3 of people that have that kind of hoarseness, cough, that kind of stuff, don't even know that they have heartburn. Not heartburn, but that they have that reflux.
Mm-hmm. So why does this happen?
So it happens, the normal mechanism when things are working correctly is you swallow. So your esophagus is made out of a different type of tissue than your stomach is. And then at the bottom of your esophagus, you have a sphincter muscle, which is really tight. And it theoretically, what it's supposed to do when it's working well is it prevents that high acid content from refluxing back up into your esophagus. Your esophagus, mouth, and pharynx and larynx, which is part of your windpipe, those aren't meant to have acid be on them. And so when that abnormally is not working correctly for whatever reason, whether it's a temporarily not working, like alcohol makes the sphincter muscle relax, or maybe there's something anatomically wrong with somebody, then that acid comes back.
So, I get it. So that sphincter muscle is relaxing and not doing its job, and so acid is coming back up.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And what are the risk factors that make reflux more common?
So risk factors would be obesity. If you have a hiatal hernia, which some people know what that is if they have it, where the stomach has kind of come up the diaphragm a little bit. Anyway, it changes the pressure in the stomach. Pregnancy, very, very common to have reflux. I had that even just with drinking water. You can get it when you're pregnant.
Wow.
And that's for a variety of reasons. One of them is because of delayed gastric emptying, meaning like if your stomach isn't emptying in a timely fashion, which can be caused by medications, caused by diabetes, caused by different things. The things that can make acid reflux worse, like it can cause it even though your anatomy is normal, be smoking. So nicotine's a big one. Caffeine can hugely cause that. So say people smoke and have a cup of coffee together, that's a really bad combination for acid reflux.
Bad combination.
In general, yeah. Eating large meals or eating late at night, again, before you go to lay down. So any of that, if you did have any refluxing up when you're laying down.
Major guilty.
I know, you do that. And then eating certain foods that are triggers, which a lot of us know, say you eat really acidy foods like tomato sauce, chocolate, mint can cause reflux as well. And then certain medications can also make it more common.
I'll pretend I didn't hear you say chocolate.
Yeah, you're not too bad with that. All right, hey, I think we have to take a commercial right now.
All right, let's go to commercial.
Okay.
Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. Hey, welcome back to Live It Up. We're here with Amy. We're talking about acid reflux. Do you have it? What do you do about it? And how do you know you have it? So let's talk about what are the risks of not treating acid reflux?
Yes, this is a good thing for people to know. It's an important thing for people to know because a lot of people will come in and they'll say, oh yeah, I've been taking Tums every night for a year. Or, or they're having symptoms really frequently and they're just popping Tums. And so meaning that they're having constant issues with reflux or nearly constant. So over time, that exposure to the acid leads to chronic inflammation at the bottom, usually the bottom of your esophagus. And one thing it can do is it can lead to scarring, which can then cause a stricture. And people will have food get stuck. And they actually have to go, then there's a procedure that can be done where you go down with a scope and they stretch out that stricture. So that can happen.
Unpleasant.
Yes, and you can also get ulcerations in the bottom of your esophagus, again from that acid reflux. So that can be have pain when you swallow and have difficulty swallowing, and they can even bleed. And then over time, the most concerning thing would be that over time, if this condition is left untreated, then you can get some changes in the cells, precancerous changes called Barrett's esophagus, and then that can eventually increase the risk of esophageal cancer, cancer of your esophagus. So it's really important because it's not just a benign condition to have untreated reflux happening all the time.
Got it.
Yeah.
So take it seriously.
Yeah, so if you're having heartburn on a regular basis, take it seriously. Talk to your provider about it.
All right, so let's say we go into our provider.
Yes.
What do we do to diagnose it?
So almost always it's diagnosed based on history and the fact. So I listen to someone's story and then I do an exam and it's like, oh gosh, you likely have acid reflux, and then do these things, which we'll get to in a minute. To definitively diagnose it, very objectively, one thing would be to have an endoscopy or an EGD, people have heard, where they put a little flexible tube, but it has a camera and it goes down your mouth into your esophagus. And they can look for inflammation called esophagitis at the bottom of your esophagus and even take some biopsies if needed. And then there's a couple other things one thing which I've never seen a patient get done, but they actually can do a pH probe where you put this little thing down in your esophagus, a monitor, and it monitors the pH. And then you can also do
do you leave that there?
Yeah, you leave it there overnight. I think it's overnight. I've never had anyone ask a patient of mine to do that. And the other option, which we don't do very often either, but you can do a barium swallow where you can see the barium refluxing back up.
Wow. None of those sound enjoyable.
No, yes, not a
So
good
again,
thing.
take it seriously because it's pretty prevalent. And I actually have had some firsthand experience with this.
Yes, you have.
I'm managing it now, very well, I should say. But I did have to have something stuck down my esophagus, and people don't want to go through that. So if you want to manage it, what are the lifestyle changes that need to be in place to do that?
So like my normal spiel with patients, I have a little handout that I've made. So someone comes into me with heartburn and it's new and it doesn't seem like there's any red flags to it. I give them this handout, which has a bunch of changes which I'll go through. I'll have them go on a medication for 6 to 8 weeks while they're really good with these changes I want them to make. And then frequently, that's all that needs to happen. So the changes are specifically would be stop smoking because the tobacco or the nicotine decreases the ability of that sphincter muscle to work. Alcohol, huge problem. So really for those 6 to 8 weeks while you're really trying to get your esophagus to heal, you should have no alcohol. You can elevate the head of your bed 6 to 9 inches. I don't see a lot of people do that. It doesn't work just to do pillows because then you kind of are scrunched. So it actually is like the whole thing supposed to be elevated.
I remember my mom did that. Her bed was like...
Yeah, so people can do that. And then not, eating at least 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. That's a big one. Eating food slowly, making sure you're chewing well and just taking your time and not overeating. Avoiding the foods that trigger reflux, like we talked about, fatty foods, fried foods, tomato sauces, mints, sometimes onion, garlic, caffeine. People will know their triggers usually.
I eat a lot of garlic.
Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah, I know. And some people, when they get to the point where things are inflamed, it seems like everything is a trigger. But usually once you can get control of it, then you can realize, oh gosh, there are these certain things that really are bad for me.
Yeah. And it can get really bad and very painful. Like when I had this bout of it a few months ago, it was hard to eat anything, and it was very painful. I mean, I lost weight because I was just like not eating. So it can get to that point where, and you don't want it to get to that point. So is it something that's manageable?
Yeah, so definitely it's the rub is that well, so let me talk about the treatment. So the one thing you can do, obviously, if you just have it sporadically, like say you go have Italian food and red wine and tomato sauce and then chocolate, and you have heartburn, right?
And garlic. And all
Yeah,
of
I
it.
mean, so you could definitely take an antacid like Mylanta or Tums or something like that, or take a Pepcid, as needed. So there's the medications or antacids that neutralize the stomach acid. Then there's medications that reduce acid production, which would be like Pepcid or Zantac. I think Tagamet is one of them. And so those usually last for about 12 hours, and they block some acid, but not all of them. And then you have your proton pump inhibitors, which is like Prilosec or Prevacid, Nexium, Acifex, those ones. And those are called, you're smiling at me, those are called proton pump inhibitors, and those like completely block the acid.
Yeah, I was just smiling because proton pump inhibitors, like, okay, I don't know what that is, but it sounds cool.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the risk of that in a minute, though, because you need your stomach acid, right, to digest and to work properly. So it's a kind of a problem to block that. And then some people actually need to have surgery. It's called a fundoplication, where they actually can tighten that sphincter muscle to not have the acid come back up.
Whoa, how do they do that?
Well, they usually wrap something kind of at the top. I don't know exactly what they wrap it with, but the top of the stomach to make that sphincter tight.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, that's well, yeah. Well, so basically, I'll just move on to the next thing. The problem is that when you take a proton pump inhibitor, first of all, their one main side effect that can happen is diarrhea, which is not fun. The other thing is that we used to think when these first came out that they're just safe forever and you could always be on them, but now we know that's not really true. So the one thing that can happen is your stomach gets really used to them, and then when you stop them, you get more acid production. So you actually have to wean off of them really slowly. It's also been associated with an increased risk of pneumonia, potentially with C. diff, that kind of type of diarrhea, fractures, osteoporotic fractures, B12 deficiency, maybe even dementia. So the problem is that being on the medication long-term is a problem, but having acid reflux long-term is a problem. So really, the best thing people can do is to make changes in their lifestyle to not have reflux anymore.
You heard it. Make changes in your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You do not want to get stuck with this. Take it seriously. We have just about 30 seconds left. So thanks for that, because that's really good information.
Yeah, so what, I'm not especially trained into knowing exactly what to do in your diet, but there is a website called the Voice Institute of New York, and Dr. Kaufman, and she's written a few different books, and she's studied low acid diet and what to do. She's an ENT by training, and so that's a great website to go to, and her books are on Amazon. And if you really want to beat this with lifestyle, which is the best thing you can do to not be on medication long term, that's the thing to do.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. I love it. Hey, it's time to get out there. Be a source of kindness. Be a source of contribution. You have something to offer this world, and we believe in you.